It's almost Halloween, so let's talk about curses. As the story goes, it is Game 4 of the 1945 World Series between the Detroit Tigers and Chicago Cubs, when William Cyanis, a local business owner, is asked to leave the stadium due to Murphy, his pet goat, bothering fans and/or smelling bad. Before leaving the game, Cyanis reportedly declares that, quote, "Them Cubs, they ain't gonna win no more," which is a great quote because it just sounds natural that came from a guy in Chicago in the 40s who tried to bring a goat to a baseball game. He returned home and commissioned a telegram to be sent to Cubs owner Philip K. Wrigley, which stated that his Cubs will, quote, "never win a World Series again because you insulted my goat." And Cyanis' promise held true. Time marched on, and despite the Cubs fielding all-time greats like Ernie Banks, Ryne Sandberg, and Sammy Sosa, the team could never get over the hump and win a World Series. At one point, a local Orthodox priest tried cleansing the Cubs of their curse by spreading holy water around the team's dugout, but to no avail. The Chicago Cubs had been cursed by a goat for all time. Or at least for 71 years until 2016, when the team finally laid the ghosts of Murphy the Goat to rest by winning the World Series. Stepping back further in time, we find the curse of the Bambino, when in 1920 the Boston Red Sox, who had enjoyed unparalleled success, winning 5 of the first 15 World Series championships, sold a young pitcher by the name of Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. Ruth obviously went on to become not just one of the greatest baseball players of all time, but a cultural icon that helped New York win 4 of almost 25 championships, while the Boston Red Sox languished in a title drought that lasted 84 years. Until finally being exorcised in 2004 during a magical playoff run that saw them go from the brink of elimination down 3 games to nothing against the Yankees and down to their last at bat to coming all the way back and winning 4 straight to move on to the World Series where they would face the St. Louis Cardinals, the team that beat them in their first 2 post-Ruth World Series in 1946 and 1967. But after a 4-game sweep, the curse of the Bambino had been laid to rest. What these stories all have in common is the exorcising of demons. People don't like stories of perennial failure with no hope in sight. But what if there was a curse that had no end? A curse for which there was no hope? And what if it couldn't be localized to any one team or even one city? What if it could travel around, bringing despair and misery wherever it went? What if it could even kill? This is a story of the worst sports curse you've never heard of. At the concrete jungle known as Veterans Stadium, the Kansas City Royals' Willie Wilson is struck out by Frank Tug McGraw to cement the Philadelphia Phillies' first championship in team history. A history which dates back to 1883, when the team was called the Philadelphia Quakers. You would think this in and of itself would mark the end of a curse, but it didn't. You see, Philadelphians take to losing like a fish to water. Their city's most famous icon is a fictional athlete who lost. Philly fans don't need an explanation. Losing is just what happens here. So it should come as no surprise that when those people experience winning, it requires police to contain the excitement and a courthouse in the stadium. And in 1980, that's just what happened, when the Phillies got over the hump and won their first world championship. But just as the city celebrated and players sprayed champagne around the locker room, a curse was brewing. It was gestating, in fact, growing fingers, toes, and a central nervous system. And a few weeks later, at a hospital just 40 miles away, it was birthed into this world. A living, breathing curse. Oh, hi everyone. I'm the Curse. Now, some of you might be skeptical of this fact, and I don't blame you. In fact, Philadelphia sports fans even invented an entirely different fictional curse to explain the city's sports failures. The curse of Billy Penn is one in which the construction of the One Liberty Place skyscraper overtook the William Penn statue as the tallest point in the city, cursing Philadelphia teams and preventing them from ever winning a championship, until a statuette of Penn was placed atop City Hall and the Phillies broke the curse in 2008. But I'm sorry, it's me, and you are about to see my powers go far beyond anything you can imagine. My powers transcend time, space, life, and even death, going far beyond the city of Philadelphia, spanning close to a dozen states and most of the entire country, crossing into several sports and even contributing to multiple deaths. I am the ultimate curse, and this is my story. We already started in Philadelphia, so let's knock that one out first. I was born just outside Philadelphia, right after the Phillies won the World Series. 2 months later, the Philadelphia Eagles, favorites to win Super Bowl 15, were completely outmatched by the underdog Oakland Raiders. Now, naysayers might point out that the 1983 76ers won the NBA Finals by sweeping the Los Angeles Lakers, but this is actually where the curse itself begins to take shape, because I wasn't in or around Philadelphia when that happened. Between the ages of 1 and 3, my family moved to Annapolis, Maryland to be close to my grandparents, so the city of Philadelphia was spared from my infant terror. We moved back to the Philadelphia area in the summer of '83. After which the Baltimore Orioles won the World Series. The lesson here is that it wasn't my existence that causes the curse, just my presence. I grew up just a stone's throw away from Philadelphia, and occasionally a Philadelphia sports team would string together a decent season and compete for a title. Let's see how that went. In 1985, 1987, and 1997, the Philadelphia Flyers advanced to the Stanley Cup, where they would get absolutely wrecked by the combined efforts of Wayne Gretzky and Steve Yzerman. 1993, the Philadelphia Phillies advanced to the World Series but are struck down by the Toronto Blue Jays with Joe Carter's bottom of the ninth title-winning home run. 2001, Allen Iverson dragged the Philadelphia 76ers to the NBA Finals, where he would drop 48 points and famously step over Tyronn Lue in a shocking Game 1 victory before dropping the next 4 to the Lakers. And that was it. With me living on its outskirts, one of America's largest cities, with teams in all 4 major sports and a combined 5 championship appearances, had nothing to show for them for more than 20 years. Something had to change, and it was me. In 2006, I left the state of Pennsylvania and headed south to the Delmarva area. And wouldn't you know it, in 2008, the Philadelphia Phillies won the World Series. In 2017, the Philadelphia Eagles won their first Super Bowl. Now, maybe this all sounds like the ravings of an overly superstitious Philly sports lunatic to you, and that's fair. But you have to understand that the city of Philadelphia is merely the tip of this iceberg. The lore goes much, much, much deeper. For whatever reason, the gods have decided that when I try to enjoy sports, people suffer. In 1994, Americans caught a case of soccer fever as the World Cup was being played in the good old US of A. So I excitedly sat down to watch my first soccer game between the USA and Colombia. The very first goal of my very first soccer match was an own goal when Colombia's Andres Escobar inadvertently kicked the ball into his own net. Upon his team's elimination and his return to Colombia, he was shot 6 times and killed. This would be an ongoing theme. I played and watched a lot of sports as a kid, and like most boys, I enjoyed bonding with my father over shared interests, even if they didn't really interest me. Every weekend, the old man liked to play a round of golf and then watch the PGA Tour. So, being the apple of his eye, I wanted to have a golfer to root for. So I sat down with him one day and watched and noticed that one golfer didn't look like any of the others. He wore these goofy, old-fashioned clothes that looked like they were from another time period. I thought that was cool, so I decided he was going to be my favorite golfer. He was killed in a plane crash. Speaking of golf, in my early 20s I worked at a country club. Sunday was our busiest time as the local gentlemen would play around before coming in for some beers and to watch a golf tournament or the NASCAR race. I have never been into racing in any capacity. But, you know, enthusiasm can be infectious. So one Sunday, at the end of my shift, I decided to stick around, have a beer with the guys, and watch a NASCAR race. And at the end of the race, the sport's most popular driver was dead. I am not supposed to enjoy sports. I'll admit that thus far, my case for being the living embodiment of a sports curse isn't all that strong. You've got a city that was cursed whenever I was there and some oddly timed, tangentially related tragedies. So there's only one thing left to do. Let's take this show on the road. I mentioned before that I left Pennsylvania and moved south to Maryland, where I eventually went back to school. The community college didn't have any sports teams that I could curse, but as I was finishing up my degree, I applied to and was accepted into the University of Oregon. I received my acceptance letter on January 10th, 2015. It was a bittersweet day because 2 days later, the Oregon Ducks would play the Ohio State Buckeyes in the College Football National Championship, and I already knew what was going to happen. The Ducks were heavy favorites, but had made the fatal mistake of accepting me into their lives. They were absolutely throttled 42-20. That fall, I moved across the country to attend school and brought my curse with me. But I mean, how much damage could I really do? This was an Oregon team that had been ranked in the top 10 for most of the last decade. Look at this chart. Can you spot when I was at the University of Oregon? The people of Eugene loved their Ducks and just wanted to see them reach the mountaintop. They didn't even know who I was or that I was even there, let alone that I was causing their beloved football team to plummet into the abyss. But there's my work. As you can see, the crater lasted for exactly 4 years. At this point, the pandemic kicked off, and I decided I needed a change of scenery. So who should we torment next? It's the afternoon of April 5th, 2021. Since tormenting the University of Oregon and their beloved football team, I have taken my curse north to Spokane, Washington. The city is abuzz because the Gonzaga Bulldogs basketball team are playing in the NCAA championship that evening. You might not think basketball when you think of the Pacific Northwest, but it is king here in Spokane. I have never seen this many basketball hoops in driveways. They love their basketball and they love their Bulldogs, and this is their night. Gonzaga had made the last 22 NCAA tournaments, but despite always having a good or even great team, they had yet to see the mountaintop. But this time would be different. Gonzaga enters the championship game with a flawless record of 35-0. They had mowed down all comers, and all that stood between them and immortality was one game, and me. As I stood in line to get coffee and listened to two Gonzaga students talk about the game with giddiness and excitement, I was torn over whether or not I should tell them, whether they deserved to know the truth, that they were about to experience crushing defeat because a man they'd never met was born thousands of miles away and had decided to move here a few months ago. The game wasn't even close. Curses are funny things, and to the untrained eye, it may all seem like cherry-picking random events, but it's real. It lives within me. Here, let me show you what I mean. This is the 2021 Philadelphia Eagles season, and for one of these games, I had returned from the West Coast and was actually in Philadelphia when it happened. Can you spot it? You have to look for the trajectory. After beating up on a pretty terrible Falcons team, the 2021 Eagles struggled, piling up losses against much better opponents. But here, they found their stride against the Lions, before playing a pretty competitive affair and a close loss to a good Chargers offense. Then, they really started to put things together against the Broncos and Saints. Then, wait, what? Yeah, that's me. I went home for Thanksgiving. The Eagles are playing the lowly Giants, and after putting up 44, 30, and 40 points, they can only muster 7. Now, let's see what happens when I leave Philadelphia and return to the West Coast. Yeah, the last game of the year, the Eagles had already wrapped up a playoff berth, so they weren't even playing starters. But if you look at this 9-game stretch, the Eagles went 7-2, and look like a competitive contender for 8 of those games, and a Pee-wee football team for 1. Just 1. If you look at American sports on a map, it seems like the entire middle of the country is just cursed. Sure, you have bright spots like the Jordan-era Bulls or the Yzerman-era Detroit Red Wings, but this just isn't where winning happens. Cleveland is cursed, Cincinnati is cursed, Minnesota is cursed. New York, Southern California, and sometimes Texas, this is where championships happen. US sports are like a cone of failure. Many of these states don't even have a professional sports team. They know better. Nothing great is ever allowed to happen here anyway, so this is how you stay clear of a curse. And this is where I live today. People in the Deep South love college football, and I'm really sorry to the good people of Arkansas, but I have to live somewhere. I'm still in my first year living here, and here is how the Arkansas Razorbacks are doing. It's not pretty. Fans are not happy. I've heard talk of needing to just fire the head coach, burn the entire program to the ground, and rebuild it from scratch. And I'm sorry, but for now, that will not help you. I live here, and even though I don't care about Arkansas Razorbacks football or college football in general, really, for right now, you are cursed until the winds of life carry me somewhere else.